Hello there, and thank you for joining me for this week's edition of Telile 24/7. I'm your host, Adam Cook. On this week's show, I'll talk to Jessica MacDonald of the Cape Breton Partnership about a job fair that her organization is hosting in Louisdale in just a couple of weeks' time. You're also going to hear how Port Hawkesbury lawyer Patrick Lamey feels about being among the first group of Nova Scotia lawyers to receive the King's Counsel designation since the passing of Queen Elizabeth II this past summer. We also have some updates from the Richmond Municipal Council table, and at the end of the show, it's the return of the infamous Telile 24/7 Fast 5 game. But we begin with an update on a new recreational multi-use facility that Richmond County wants to design to replace the aging Richmond Arena just outside of Louisdale. A new feasibility study on the proposal was supposed to get underway shortly. However, the bidding process for that feasibility study has turned out to be more costly than originally expected. The municipality was targeting to have the study come in at $50,000, but recent bids have put the cost of that study up to $130,000. So, how do municipal councillors and Warden Amanda Mombourquette feel about all this? Here's some interview footage that I took of Amanda Mombourquette just after Monday's regular council session in Arishat.
So the idea of a new facility really came from our recreation department. This is probably upwards of a year ago, and certainly as a council we're very well aware that the Richmond Arena, as much as a brilliant job that staff do of maintaining that facility, and the quality of the ice is fantastic, as much as they try, that facility is nearing the end of its life. So we knew that we had to start to make preparations for a consultation with community and planning for a new future facility. However, once that concept was brought forward from staff, immediately I remember last year we started to talk about, let's open the scope here. Let's make sure that the scope is broad so that there might be space available for meeting spaces, that there may be opportunities for arts and cultural events to take place there, that there might be potentially some, additional office locations. So we really wanted to keep the scope broad in terms of when we issued the RFP. So we did that, and of course the bids have come back a lot higher than the amount that we had allocated. We had allocated that smaller amount counting on being able to leverage those funds, and we still are very much hopeful that we'll be able to do that.
At Monday's regular meeting of Richmond Municipal Council in Arishat, some councillors seemed caught off guard by the new price tag for the feasibility study. Did Warden Mombourquette feel the same way?
No, I'm not surprised at all that the bids are coming in high. I think if you ask any municipal unit or any organization that's issuing RFPs right now, bids are coming in higher than anticipated, and there's lots of factors that are driving that increase in cost. I do think that the broadening in scope, from recreational to multi-use sort of more open concept opportunity is part of what's driving that as well. So I'm not very surprised by it, but I completely understand councillors' hesitation. It's a whole lot more money. We're going from a $50,000 budget to an additional 80, looking at up to 130,000 that the county would potentially cover. So I completely understand their decision to want to delay. My feeling is that, with this delay or without it, we are going to have to come to a decision on our plans for the Richmond Arena in the coming, in the very near future because of the, the age of the facility. So, I'm hopeful that, staff will be able to find some funds that we can leverage, and that, council will have be in a little bit more of a comfortable, be a little bit more comfortable with the expanded scope given the, given the funds that we have available to us. So we'll look forward to the work that's going to happen over the next month on that.
However, while staff will take another month to look at the figures for the feasibility study for the new recreational facility, the wheels are in motion for other aspects of this project.
Yeah, well, and I will say I think we're allowing for another month of timeline. There is already work underway by staff, and it's just, not all of the answers were they were not in receipt of the answers that I think council would have needed in order to feel comfortable in going forward. So we'll give the timeline another month and see what happens.
We'll hear more from Warden Amanda Mombourquette in just a short time. But right now, here is the Human Resources Advisor from the Cape Breton Partnership, Jessica MacDonald, giving us some details about a job fair that's coming up in Louisdale on April the 13th. It's one of 4 job fairs that the partnership is hosting around Cape Breton Island, so I thought it would be a good idea to speak to Jessica MacDonald about the process of holding these job fairs, how that's changed during pandemic times, and how the labour outlook is looking across Cape Breton Island at this point in its history. So here is my interview with Jessica MacDonald right now. And joining us to talk about the job fair coming up in Louisdale later on in the spring, and also about her general outlook as the Human Resources Advisor for the Cape Breton Partnership, we are pleased to welcome Jessica MacDonald to Telile 24/7. Jessica, thank you for making some time for us today.
Thanks for the invitation, Adam.
Well, it's a pleasure to have you. And obviously, the main reason we wanted to have you here is to talk about the job fair that's taking place in Louisdale a little later on this spring. This is one of a number of job fairs that is happening across Cape Breton Island right now. First of all, why don't you give us the exact details of the date, time, location, and what people attending the job fair can expect when they go to Louisdale?
Great. So for Louisdale location, that'll be on April the 13th from 11 to 1:30 in the afternoon. So it'll take place at the Louisdale Lions Club. And when employers arrive, they can expect to see your usual setup for a job fair. We'll have employers around the perimeter of the room at their tables, talking to job seekers one-on-one. So the other thing that we'll do in Louisdale and all the locations of the job fair is reserve one corner of the room for our job board. So we'll have laptops set up so job seekers can browse the opportunities that are available across the island that may not be represented at the job fairs. We'll also have a corner of the room for employers to have quick pre-screening conversations with job seekers, because when you're speaking to someone across the table, there's only so much information you can gather. So if an employer encounters a job seeker that they think could be a good fit for their position, they can take them aside, jump over to that corner, and have a quick conversation to try to work through some of those pre-screening type questions and hopefully find their perfect candidate.
Now, this is not always the case with every single job fair that an organization hosts, but can you give us a sense of what kinds of companies and industries have been invited to take part in this job fair and what kind of positions they might be looking for?
That's a great question. And in February, we put out sort of a pre-registration call out to all employers and service providers. And that was an effort to see who was really interested in attending the job fair. And we were really excited to have a wide variety of employers that are interested. Of course, around the Cabot Trail, Inverness areas, there's a lot of seasonal businesses, a lot of accommodations, tourism-based businesses, but there's also other businesses too that are year-round. We've got, some government bodies coming. We have people coming from places in Halifax where their head office is, but they may have remote opportunities available in Cape Breton. There's part-time, there's full-time. There's opportunities for, a new grad or a student. There's also opportunities for more professionals that have a bit more education and experience. So we have a wide variety.
I imagine the Cape Breton Partnership has held job fairs of this nature before. Can you tell us a little bit about what that experience has been like? And like you mentioned earlier, sometimes you have a potential employer that could talk to a potential employee right away. Can you tell us a little bit about some of the results that might have happened from going to different communities around the island and having these kinds of events?
Yep, that's another good question. I know the partnership participated in a job fair. It was before me. I started at the partnership in October of 2019 in a different role at that time. But I believe it was the spring of 2019 where the partnership hosted a job fair in Inverness. And that was a successful event where many employers were able to find their ideal candidate. But of course, then COVID happened and we weren't able to host or really participate in any job fairs of our own. We have attended others over the last few years, but this is the first time that we are hosting a job fair on our own since 2019. And there was some success at that job fair, and we were looking to replicate that, but also not only in Inverness, but across the island.
Is there some kind of relief for both you and the people involved that we're now at the point that you can host those kinds of job fairs again?
Absolutely. There's a ton of relief. It's so much easier to get a sense of someone when you're in face to face. So we're really excited to be able to travel across the island and host these job fairs, to let employers know that organizations like the partnership, we have a lot of employees that serve the whole island. So we don't want places like Louisdale, Richmond County to feel left out. And we want to get down into the community and make sure that those employers get support to find the right people.
So part of the reason that I wanted to bring you on board for this edition of Telile 24/7 is to introduce you and your position to our viewers here at Telile Community Television, Jessica. So you mentioned you've been with the Cape Breton Partnership since 2019. You were their human resources advisor. So what are the types of things that you're looking at to be able to line up prospective employees with prospective employers? And I mean, just tell me a little bit about what you do day to day with the partnership.
I think it would be helpful to give a little bit of context to how I got started at the partnership. So
Okay.
originally I was a Atlantic Immigration Pilot Program Coordinator. There were a few of us that had that role. When the pilot ended, a few of us transitioned into different roles with the partnership. So that was a great opportunity for me to transition into this HR role. And it's a unique role because it's designed to support, domestic recruitment, not only recruitment, but that's certainly been the focus over the last few years. So I support employers primarily, not so much on the job seeker side, but my focus is to work with employers across the island to help them grow or sustain their business through a strategic HR plan. So many employers, especially the small businesses, don't have that. They're owner operators, they're really busy running their business day to day, so they may not have the time or expertise to put a lot of work into that other side of things, the more strategic, forward thinking HR work. So I can provide advice, I can provide guidance, I can, review policies, things like that. But primarily over the last year, since I've had this role, it's been a lot of recruitment attention type questions, guidance, support. And because I had that previous role in immigration, when I talk to employers, even if they're not thinking about immigration yet or looking at that as an option, I'm sort of prepping them to start thinking about it, because we know that with the labor market challenges, which existed before COVID and will continue to exist because
Mm.
of our declining population, we know that more employers are going to need to consider immigration in the future, if not now. So part of my role is to get them ready for that, get them ready for immigration, going through those processes. It's pretty difficult for a lot of employers, especially if they don't have dedicated people on their team to handle all of that paperwork and those processes. So part of my role, plus we have other people at the partnership that are more hands-on once they get into the immigration, I'm
Mhm.
helping prepare them document wise. So making sure they have job descriptions. They know what a standard sort of employment contract looks like. What is the knock? All those sort of questions that come up when you're in the immigration process. I want to help employers gain that knowledge before they're actually going through that.
Mhm. And do you get the sense, having worked with the Atlantic Immigration Pilot, now the Atlantic Immigration Project, of course, it is now permanent, you get the sense, having had that experience, that those that are coming to Cape Breton are willing to be mobile and willing to look anywhere for that work, that they're not just looking in the urban centers, Sydney, Glace Bay, that they could be considering Waikagama or Arishat or Ingonish or Cheticamp or places like that. They're basically looking at the whole island.
Yeah, in my experience, they are looking at the whole island, and it really depends too, because like anyone, what kind of lifestyle they're looking for will impact where they want to live. But of course, especially with immigration, having a job and a permanent, usually job for immigration is really important. So yes, I have seen people willing to move across the island. Maybe CBU brought them here and they were living in Sydney for some time, but I've seen lots of former students that are willing to, go beyond the urban area of Cape Breton and try out some different areas and working and living there.
Mhm. We have even seen some people rooted in Sydney, whether or not they're going to CBU or NSCC, but they will actually commute to places
Mhm.
like St. Peter's and Port Hawkesbury to be able to have that work. So you must be seeing that day by day as you're working with different people coming in and looking for opportunities as well.
Yeah, definitely. And that's part of our push with these job fairs is to encourage students across the island to not only go to the location that's closest to where they live, but go to many locations of the job fair so that you can see a sense of the whole island, what's out there, and choose where you want to be.
So with that in mind, I mean, obviously we're focusing on the April 13th job fair in Louisdale for our Richmond County viewers and Strait area viewers, but can you give us a quick sense of where and when some of these other job fairs are happening, just in case people might be watching right now and thinking, oh, I can't get there on the 13th. So where are some of the other places that they might be able to go?
So starting on April the 4th, that's our first job fair. That will take place in Sydney at the port. All of the times are the same to make it easy, so 11 to 1:30 each day. April 5th will be in Inverness at the Inverness Fire Hall. Of course, April the 13th, we're in Louisdale. And then April the 14th will be in Bedeque at the Inverary Resort.
All right, that'll be helpful to many people watching. And we have covered a lot of ground in just a short time, Jessica, as I thought we might. Did you have anything else that you wanted to add about all this just before we wrap up?
The only thing I wanted to say additionally is anyone that's interested, whether you're an employer or a job seeker, you can still sign up, especially a job seeker, but of course we have room for employers too. So if you are interested, you can go to the partnership's website, capebretonpartnership.com,
Mhm.
or you can email me at jessica@capebretonpartnership.com and I will send you a link to sign up.
Jessica MacDonald, you've got a lot on your plate doing an important job, and we appreciate you taking some time to speak to us about the job fairs and about the general labor outlook for Cape Breton here on Telile 24/7. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me, Adam.
Jessica MacDonald is the Human Resources Advisor for the Cape Breton Partnership. We've been speaking to her today via Zoom. Stay tuned for more of Telile 24/7 in just a moment. A local organization looking into the development of wind energy strategies for the Strait of Counsel has gotten an invitation to a worldwide wind energy conference in Denmark. Wind Europe 2023 will take place in Copenhagen from April 23rd to 29th. And the Nova Scotia government has asked Warden Amanda Mombourquette to consider representing the Strait Area Offshore Wind Task Force at this conference. But how much will that cost? Well, it costs $5,700 per person. So we're going to hear from Warden Mombourquette right now about how Council intends to pay for this particular trip and why it's important for the Strait Area to be represented in Copenhagen during the Wind Europe 2023 conference.
Since December 2021, Mayor Brenda and I have been co-chairing the Offshore Wind Task Force for the Strait of Counsel region. We have spent a good amount of time and effort trying to understand the industry's potential for this region. It's really not only about offshore wind. I think, related industries such as the clean fuels production facilities, the hydrogen production facilities that we're seeing wanting to locate here in Point Tupper, absolutely a related industry. So we've spent a great deal of time trying to learn, understand, and engage with community on this particular opportunity. We have learned that, Nova Scotia's wind speeds are some of the highest in the world off of our shores, actually the highest in the world, which I don't think will come to anybody, as a surprise to anybody who has been living in these windy times here in Richmond County. And what we have also learned, though, is because of a variety of factors, including the water depth and our incredible natural asset with the Strait of Counsel and as well as our sort of experience with the Sable offshore, that we have a huge competitive advantage, and it places us as third in the world for gigawatt potential off of our coast. And we're Nova Scotia, third in the world behind giants like the UK and the US Atlantic. So the opportunity is tremendous. I will say, and I've said it since day one with the task force, our guiding principle has been that we want to engage with rights holders and stakeholders, and that we don't want one industry to come at a detriment to another. So we do believe there's a way forward to share that ocean and that wind resource to the benefit of all Nova Scotians, in particular to the benefit of people here in the Strait of Counsel. We've pressed that message hard with the provincial government and even with the federal government, and I have to say I'm really proud of how the provincial government has embraced this opportunity, but also embraced the idea that how we do this is every bit as important as what we do. So receiving that invitation to be part of that delegation to Wind Europe in Copenhagen, I think was a big deal for the Offshore Wind Task Force and a huge opportunity that we can't miss. The agenda is intensive, but there's going to be opportunities to connect with other local governments, to learn from their best practices, to learn about best practices related to investment in port infrastructure, to be better acquainted with some of the industries who are, like I said, in related industries, to find out more about what the supply chain potential could look like here, because really it's not just about who's capturing the wind or who's making the clean fuels. It's about all the businesses that have to service those businesses and what that could mean for our region, and how it could diversify our economy, and in doing so, improve our quality of life here, while, by the way, trying to help improve our contribution to climate change on a global scale, right? So it's we really see this as a win-win. The invitation from the province was greatly appreciated by the task force, and so I'll be proud to be representing that group and Richmond County at that event. But also, I'll also be bringing back lots of great learnings. So it's an exciting moment, and hopefully more to come on that kind of thing.
While the Strait Area Offshore Wind Task Force is attending the Copenhagen conference at the invitation of the Nova Scotia government, the province isn't paying any part of the $5,700 that it's estimated that it will cost for Warden Mombourquette to take part. So Richmond Municipal Councillors, voting at the regular monthly meeting on Monday evening, voted to raise the warden's travel budget for this coming year from its usual $4,000 to $10,000. The motion to raise this travel budget included the provision that it would only be for the 2023-24 fiscal year. At the same time, Warden Mombourquette pointed out that most councillors, including herself, keep their travel costs low on an annual basis, and added that she only used 40% of her own travel budget for the previous year. She also pointed out that the Cape Breton Partnership is working with the municipalities involved to make it easier for them to bring other representatives to the conference.
So the invitation from the province is that, didn't include any financial support. It is an invitation to be part of a delegation. So the $5,700 or so that it would cost for me to attend on behalf of the county and the task force, it would be borne by the municipality solely. So we'll be looking to add that into next year's budget for warden's travel. And then we are also looking to ensure that our economic development officer will participate as well, in which case we'd be looking to fund about 25% of his costs to attend, and the remainder being financed by the town of Port Hawkesbury and the Cape Breton Partnership. The town has not, I don't believe, received this proposal yet. It is very fresh, following a conversation that I had with the Cape Breton Partnership CEO today. So hopefully they will see the value in that, and we'll be able to send a small team there.
Now, just for clarification, this economic development officer that Warden Mombourquette is speaking about isn't employed by the municipality of Richmond County. He's actually employed to serve that purpose for Richmond County and the town of Port Hawkesbury by the Cape Breton Partnership. His name is Martin Thompson, and as you're about to find out, he actually has an important connection to the host country for next month's Wind Europe 2023 conference.
He is Danish, yes. He is from Denmark, and he actually has a background working around the offshore wind sector because of his development experience in the Islands and Highlands, or Highlands and Islands of Scotland. I might have that backwards, but anyway, it's exciting because he's been working in and around on development projects with these countries who are first generation in this emerging industry, and now Canada's opportunity to be second generation it's just a great fit for us and hopefully for him.
When young lawyer Patrick Lamey first arrived in the Strait area in 1992, he had no idea that years later he would be a partner in the firm formerly known as Evans McIsaac Macmillan, as well as Port Hawkesbury's municipal solicitor, and one of the first Nova Scotians since the passing of Queen Elizabeth II last summer to be awarded the King's Counsel designation. How does he feel about all this, and why does he feel his job with the town of Port Hawkesbury is so important? To get the answers, I spoke to Patrick Lamey at his office at what's now called EMM Law. Here's our conversation right now. And now joining us from his office at EMM Law on Granville Street in Port Hawkesbury, we're pleased to welcome one of the first group of Nova Scotia lawyers to receive the King's Counsel designation. He is Patrick Lamey. He is also the municipal solicitor for the town of Port Hawkesbury. Patrick, thank you for joining us here on Telile 24/7 today.
Thank you for the invite, Adam. It's a pleasure to be with you, and thank you for the recognition. It's still a little overwhelming, so I'll do my best to answer your questions.
All right. Well, we'll take it one step at a time. But first of all, you talk about it being a little overwhelming. What was your immediate reaction that you found out just earlier this year that you were going to be Patrick Lamey, KC, be among the first King's Counsel representatives in Nova Scotia?
I will be very forthright about this as well. It's not a surprise to the individual when they finally receive that phone call from the representative of the Attorney General's office, because first someone nominates you, and as part of the procedure, you actually have to consent to the nomination. So if it's a complete surprise to you when the Attorney General's representative calls you, then you've actually forgotten about the fact that you were contacted and asked for your consent.
You've done something terribly wrong. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. So, but, even to receive that notification that you've been nominated and you've been asked for your consent is, obviously a delightful surprise, and very humbling as well, because of all that appointment represents. There's some pretty heavy, like some pretty solid words that go behind the description of the people who qualify for this position. And those who know me well are not the least bit surprised to hear me, react to it and suggest, are you sure you got the right guy?
For people who might not understand what the designation means, what do they look for?
So basically, this is an annual thing. This year, there was a group of 14 lawyers. These are lawyers. They have to have been practicing in law. They can be in public lawyers. They can be private lawyers. They can be in firms. They can be solo practitioners. They can be crown prosecutors. They can be government lawyers, corporate lawyers. They have to have practiced for at least 15 years. And again, the prerequisites is that they have been recognized as having exceptional merit and have made outstanding contributions to the legal community. So it's symbolic today. It doesn't come with a pay raise or any type of an escalation in your position necessarily, but it's a recognition. And so symbolically, they kind of hold you in high regard, and it's reserved for those who have truly demonstrated their commitment to the legal profession and to their communities. So, like I said, no small words. And of course, I don't know if people ever really think about this, but once you've been given that designation and you're far from being ready to retire, it actually can put a lot of extra pressure on you, because now the expectation is for you to maintain that reputation.
They don't come and take it away, though, do they? There's nobody from the Attorney General's office sitting in your office saying, "Work harder."
Oh dear. Anyway, well, maybe I shouldn't go there, but I suppose this is the legal business, and I'm sure there's a loophole for everything. So no, Adam, I have not researched that subject to determine under what circumstances a KC could be removed from someone, but I'm not sure at this point I want to know.
No, exactly. We'll keep that a little secret for now. We will do a follow-up interview if in the odd chance that it ever was removed, but we'll figure it out between now and then.
Yeah, no, but it is something that you retain for life, even after you retire from the practice of law.
Mm-hmm.
It is kind of interesting to read a little bit about the history and the evolution of that whole King's Council. I mean, it originated obviously in the United Kingdom,
Mhm.
and as I understand it, it was originally reserved for. In England, they do make a distinction between what they call barristers and solicitors.
Mhm.
And barristers are the people who go to court, and solicitors would be more the transactional lawyers who would help you with your deeds or your will and your estate and so forth and whatnot. Um, the For people who follow some of the British television series, there was a series called Silk that was
Mhm.
rather popular. And Silk actually is a nickname for those barristers in the United Kingdom legal system that had received their QC or KC designation. So obviously, if the monarch that is reigning at the time is a female monarch, then your designation is QC, Queen's Counsel, and if if it is a male monarch, then your designation is KC. So those people who had received, and it changes, of course. So everyone who had previously had a QC designation, they automatically became KC upon the death of Her Majesty the Queen.
Mhm. And that leads me to my next question, which is about the idea that you are among the first group of Nova Scotia lawyers to receive the King's Counsel KC designation since the passing of Queen Elizabeth II back in the summer of last year. What was going through your mind as you realized that, even just as a matter of circumstance and timing, that you're a part of this historic group that is the first in several decades to receive the KC nomination?
Yeah, well, I'm far from being, knowledgeable about all the dates and the stats, but I believe that, Queen Elizabeth's father, I believe, was King George the Sixth, and I think that he
Mhm.
died. I think he died in 1952. So it's been over 70 years since anybody had that designation of KC. So it's yeah, no, I mean it just obviously adds to the honor, and to have that distinction of being part of the first crop of Nova Scotia lawyers um, to be recognized this way. Yeah.
One of the reasons that we wanted to have you on the show as well, Patrick, is because in addition to all that you do at EMM Law with your various practices, and including being a partner of EMM Law right now, you are the official municipal solicitor for the town of Port Hawkesbury. And I'd like you to talk a little bit about the role that you play and the relationship you have with the mayor and council and with the CAO to be able to work out some of the legal issues that might come up. And even just to say, for example, does a new bylaw or policy of the town line up with the Municipal Government Act? That is the Nova Scotia Municipal Government Act. So, can you tell us a little bit about what your role is in that regard and what a municipal solicitor does from day to day?
Yeah, well, a number of years ago, there was a big reform with municipal law in this province with the enactment and the proclamation of the Municipal Government Act. Prior to that, it had been a ragtag grouping of legislation, um, all with their own individual silos. That the Towns Act and Halifax had its own specific legislation and charter and villages legislation and so on, and all of the components of that Municipal Government Act were all sort of handled with different individual legislation. So they made a significant decision to consolidate and codify municipal law into what many of us now just simply refer to as the MGA, being the Municipal Government Act. The the role of a solicitor, a town solicitor, is actually referenced in the MGA. So it is contemplated that there is going to be a municipal solicitor. Um, and and then of course every municipality is going to also have their own sets of bylaws. And of course that's interesting as well. So just my predecessor was the long-serving town solicitor Larry Evans, who,
Yes.
the coincidence, had also been my mentor, and it was under Larry that I articled back in 1992, and he continued to be a mentor for me, all through my years here at EMM Law, and all during those years, Larry was the town solicitor. And periodically I would be called in by Larry to fill in for him. I was deputized as the town solicitor before Larry's retirement. And little did I know that really I was just being groomed, I guess, for the position. During that time, Larry had undertaken with the CAOs a project to try to review the town of Port Hawkesbury's bylaws, because inevitably, as it would be with any governing body, there would be some that would be redundant, almost to the point that sometimes they even make good comedy, because of them being so out of date, and some of the things that were important, very important at one point in the town's history. But today, is far from being useful. So there was a process of culling. And so, I would have been playing a bit of a role with that. So there's culling, and then there would have been some updating of some bylaws as well, to try to, note them up and, perhaps do a little bit of comparison with some other municipal units to see how they are wording and formatting their bylaws. So my involvement does include some of that as well. And the modernization, I think, of the modern bylaws, is a work in progress that I've definitely been engaged in. And it is fascinating, because policy development, in one hand, is an act of proper language that's clear and as concise as it possibly can be, so that it can be effective for all parties. But deep down, policy writing is also a reflection of goals and priority setting, and a sort of an articulation of a community's, a town's priorities, on a number of things. So you don't always see it that way, but when you really step back, that's often, what it represents. So I actually want to say that I have found it a bit of a privilege to have had this opportunity in this time in my career to been asked to play some roles in some of this too. Now, in reality, I'm not the principal writer of the bylaws or the revisions, even to that effect. I will be pulled in periodically when there's some questions about whether the proposed wording is apropos, and kind of get my input on some of these things too. Then, of course, that's the whole exercise of modernizing bylaws. And then, in addition to that, of course, there can be new bylaws that can come forward, because, of course, we have all kinds of new topics that would never have been relevant in the past. So I would definitely getting consulted from time to time, quite often, to look at similar bylaws from other jurisdictions, perhaps as some initial inspiration, and to try to come up with wording.
And I imagine too that this has been a real history lesson for yourself as well. And some people might say, well, what's the big deal about updating bylaws? Well, nobody wants a bylaw from 1923 governing what we can do in a town in 2023. So you play an important role in conjunction with council in making sure that everything's up to date.
Oh my gosh, there's so many interesting aspects to this question that we do not need a separate session for this, really. And I'd need to bone up on it a little bit more so I could actually, present myself as like sounding like I know what I'm talking about. But the thing that I find fascinating is that, one of the principal roles of our elected officials is to help develop policy and bylaw. That is one of their fundamental roles. And so that's why to the extent as busy as staff and elected officials are with your regular annual agendas, there is that higher level exercise of looking at your existing policies and bylaws and asking, are we missing anything that would be useful? Are we being presented with a possibility of creating new bylaws that maybe we shouldn't be so quick to jump on it? Because frankly, if you look deep enough, we already have it in an existing bylaw.
Yeah.
That happens. That happens a lot, and don't just necessarily legislate and promulgate bylaws and policies just for the sake of doing them. So, and then of course, as I said, the creation of new ones. Adam, what it kind of reminds me of is how in my early part of my career, I was also doing a fair amount of advice to non-for-profit organizations. And some of the best practices for not-for-profits is to consider doing a bylaw review every few years, because so that they don't become these dust-covered papers that people actually kind of forget about, that in fact they should be rolled along with the next body of board members as being, here are our, here's how we choose to govern ourselves. This is a reflection of what our objects are, what our values are, what our goals are, what our priorities are. And so I always used to say to a lot of not-for-profits is, make it your business to look at your policies and your bylaws and ask yourself the question, are they outdated? Are they creating a dysfunction, like that they're not matching up with the reality of today, And if they're not, then this whole exercise of revisiting them is a really important exercise, because it is a tangible reflection of how what are your priorities, what are your goals, in this modern context.
You were talking a little bit about your early years with what was then known as Evans McIsaac McMillan. They, of course, were the partners of the firm. And I want to look back on that because I find it interesting that you mentioned the work that you've done as municipal solicitor and even filling in for Larry Evans. Billie Jo McLean was the mayor at that time. Now, of course, Brenda Chisholm Beaton heading into her 6th year as the mayor of Port Hawkesbury. But you arrived in the Strait area in the early 90s. Almond Chisholm was actually the mayor at that time. We were in between Billie Jo McLean mayorships for the town of Port Hawkesbury. In those early days, did that young man from Fredericton ever think that he might be putting in over 3 decades at the firm and wind up being Patrick Lamey QC in 2023? Can you kind of compare then and now?
No, I don't think that, when I first arrived here in May of 1992, I was just after having graduated from UNB Law School. Some peers of mine from law school had all decided that we would blow off some steam and take a little trip to Florida. So we all jumped into a Dodge Shadow and made our way down to Florida. And I should say, by the way, that in day number 1, we were in New Jersey, and a news report came along out of Nova Scotia. And then, what are the odds that there'd be in New Jersey radio stations that we would be hearing a news report coming out of Nova Scotia? But it was the Westray disaster.
I wondered if it would be Westray, yes.
Yeah. So anyway, that was just another reminder to me that we had, a little time to blow off some steam, but upon our return, our next adventure in our legal profession, was going to be, profound. And so anyway, upon my return, I packed up my bags and made my way here. And articling is exactly what it sounds like. You know, and it's a really hit the ground running. Try to fill your year as much as possible with uh, combining the legal education piece and passing your bar exam with also establishing relationships within the firm with the lawyers, the clients that you have the privilege of assisting, and also trying to start to introduce yourself to the community, and you know, at various levels. And so but so you're just busy. And no, you maybe there would be other people, but for me, I wasn't thinking, you know, what the trajectory at that point was. I was just trying to survive. And and I suspect that that carried on for quite a few years as well. I don't think I've ever really plotted out in great detail what exactly my trajectory would be. But frankly, the decision to be here, and to be in private practice here, um, has always, I've never had any regrets about that. And I've never really made any plans to do something different. Although it's interesting, though, I have definitely observed a number of my peers from law school job shift several times. And I've admired those people who somehow knew it was time for them to move on to the next step in their careers. And some have done very well, you know, in that regard. But fate would have it that this is where I am, and where I should be. And but again, I mean, the idea of getting in my 32nd year, you know, a KC recognition, no, I wouldn't have thought of that.
Well, life is what happens when we're busy making other plans. And I'm glad that among the life that happened for you is this designation and the life that you and your partner Heather and your son Dave have carved out here in Port Hawkesbury.
I know it's a little hard to say this properly, but I'm going to make a little shout out for rural Nova Scotia, our part of rural Nova Scotia. This, we've heard it said many times before, Adam, that this strait area, Port Hawkesbury, often punches above its weight.
Yes.
And of the grouping, there's 14 of them, and there's only 2 that are from outside of HRM. So, you know, I mean, although you know, obviously I'm honored, you know, by the recognition, but I really feel that I probably would not have received this recognition if I had not had the opportunity that this community has opened, and the early members of this law firm, Larry Evans, Harold McIsaac, Hugh McIsaac, Wayne McMillan, and all of my colleagues, and most importantly, my clientele, have believed in me. And this community has embraced me and my family, and have given me the opportunity to try to be the best version of what I hope I can be in this role. And I really think that, you know, this is something that the community should also kind of feel really good about, because it is the kind of community that gives somebody like me the opportunity to try to and strive to achieve and get this kind of recognition, you know, because it doesn't happen every day, that's for sure. So I hope that's okay, Adam. I just wanted to say that really this is something for the community to, you know, find a way to celebrate about too, for those reasons that I kind of mentioned, because it may not necessarily have happened in other communities across Nova Scotia. Not to suggest that they don't provide those same type of opportunities, but I just think there's something, and I keep trying to shout it from the rooftops to all the young law students, but I think there's really something extremely unique and special about the Strait area, and the opportunities that it can provide to entrepreneurial and hardworking folk.
Well, shows like ours and stations like Telile wouldn't exist if we didn't feel there was something special about this area. So we're glad to hear you giving a similar assessment of this community that we call home. And that's a good place for us to wrap up. Thank you so much, Patrick. And do you want to add anything else about any of this just before we wrap up?
Just that I am definitely feel quite privileged and humbled by it, and I'll just try my best to continue to follow the same memorandum that same MO that I've always operated under, which is just to try to work hard and treat my clients the way I would want to be treated. And as I joked with a few other people recently, is that my main goal is to try not to screw up too much.
In a serious note, we are very excited for you and very grateful that you took some time out of your busy day and your busy life to tell us a little bit about all this. So congratulations on the King's Council designation, and thank you, Patrick Lamey, for joining me here on Telile 24/7.
It's been a pleasure, Adam. Thank you. And thank you for everything that you are doing, and Telile too. It's important.
We do what we can, for sure. Patrick Lamey is one of the partners at EMM Law on Granville Street in Port Hawkesbury. He is also the municipal solicitor for the town of Port Hawkesbury and one of the first group of Nova Scotia lawyers to receive the King's Council designation. Stay tuned for more of Telile 24/7 in just a moment. As you've just heard from Patrick Lamey, every municipal government has bylaws. But what happens when a municipal government can't afford someone to enforce those bylaws? Well, several local straight area municipalities have been working together to try to figure out if they can cost share a bylaw enforcement officer that would serve all of these councils. Richmond Municipal Council is one of the participants. However, it hasn't been going quite as smoothly as the participating councils might have liked. We're going to hear from Warden Amanda Mombourquette about this, and we're also going to get an update on the process of setting up a new special constable's position that would be able to issue summary offense tickets on behalf of the Eastern District Planning Commission and Richmond Municipal Council. But first of all, here's Warden Mombourquette following the Richmond regular council meeting of Monday evening in Arishat, explaining where the discussions are right now with the other municipalities about a shared bylaw enforcement officer.
To this point, the discussions have been occurring between ourselves here in Richmond, the town of Port Hawkesbury, Inverness County, and really it was spurred on by outreach from the town of Mulgrave. So those are the municipalities that have been involved in the discussions so far. And certainly, I think there's interest from all parties that, perhaps we could be looking at some sort of shared position. But if we go that route, we need to keep in mind we're talking about a lot of geography. We're talking about bylaws right now that don't have a lot of commonality. So there needs to be some work done before we would be able to proceed in that direction. But I think it's a good sign that the municipalities are wanting to work together on it.
With this in mind, I asked Warden Mombourquette if there were any common threads between the municipalities involved in these discussions. Here's her response.
I would say there are common threads in terms of the desires of the municipalities, but what we haven't been able to find is we don't currently have bylaws that mirror each other's. So it's a little less common than what we thought we would be starting out with, but it is an exciting opportunity because I think we could look at developing some standardized bylaws across the board, learning from each other and making things consistent. And you can imagine if you're a resident or a business wanting to operate in this region, to know that the bylaws don't change from one region to the next, or that certain ones remain very very consistent. That's a good thing, right? So it won't work for every bylaw or every policy, but it may work for some, and that's what we're investigating now.
While the municipal councils involved agree that there can be a cost saving by each of them not having to hire their own bylaw enforcement officer, Warden Mombourquette admitted that there hasn't yet been a consensus on the top priorities for a shared bylaw enforcement officer.
So we haven't, as a municipal council, we have referred that discussion to our next bylaw and policy committee meeting, and I think that's important because we'll have more perspective from staff in that conversation, as well as perspective from our public member as well. So stay tuned.
In the meantime, the municipality is looking at a separate position that would be shared with the Eastern District Planning Commission. This special constable would have the opportunity to issue summary offense tickets if land use bylaws were violated. Here's how the warden describes that process.
That discussion on the summary offense tickets stemmed from concern that we had heard expressed from a constituent, looking at applying that to a different area. So it's something that the county is interested in. It's something that we want to pursue with Eastern District Planning Commission. And so the motion was brought forward this evening so that we would have people identified for the fiscal year, because this is the time, this meeting is our yearly meeting where we appoint all of those folks, as officers, special constables, what have you, with the Eastern District Planning Commission. So we wanted to get that done in time so that we can pursue that line of thought. So, now all of the pieces need to be put in place.
While the exact job description for the special constable still has to be worked out, Warden Mombourquette suggested that Council's approval on Monday night will allow funds to be set aside for this position within the next fiscal year, as opposed to having to wait another 12 months to set up the position. And to wrap things up here on Telile 24/7, it's time for another round of our world-famous Fast Five game. It's been a while since we've played the Fast Five, but fortunately we found a willing volunteer in the Cape Breton Partnership's Human Resources Advisor, Jessica MacDonald. Here are her answers to my foolish questions on the Telile 24/7 Fast Five. And now, taking part in our infamous Fast Five segment here on Telile 24/7, we're pleased to welcome back from the Cape Breton Partnership Human Resources Advisor, Jessica MacDonald. Jessica, are you all ready to play the Fast Five?
I sure am.
All right, let's hit the ground running. Coke, Pepsi, or neither?
Pepsi.
Pepsi, all right. Well, I'll forgive you for that one. That's fine. All right. I have watched this movie 10 times. I would gladly watch it another 10 times. What is that movie?
Finding Nemo.
Finding Nemo.
Yeah.
That's lovely. Did you like the sequel?
Not as much, but it was good.
All right. Remember, to all our viewers, fish are friends, not food. Okay. Next up, dream vacation.
My dream vacation. Honestly, I think it would be maybe Ireland, Scotland, something like that.
Oh, that's marvelous. I finally got to Scotland last summer. Ireland is still on my bucket list. So I hope you and I each get there over the course of our lives.
me
That'd
too.
be wonderful. You can be any animal for one day. What is that animal?
It's got to be a dog.
A dog. Do you have dogs?
I sure do. I have one and I need many, many more.
So you would like the pampered life that you give your dog then?
Absolutely. My dogs are so well taken care of. I would give anything to have that.
Ah, that's marvelous. All right. And final question, favorite sandwich?
Oh, I've got some colleagues that are going to laugh at this one. A clubhouse.
A clubhouse.
Yeah.
That's a good sandwich. Why would your colleagues laugh at you having a clubhouse?
I am notorious for ordering a clubhouse pretty much every time we go out to lunch. I'm apparently not that adventurous when it comes to my sandwiches.
Now, some people would call that consistency.
I like that. I will go with that.
Exactly. Like the old Alexander Keith logo, those who like it a lot. So Jessica MacDonald likes her clubhouse sandwiches.
She likes it a lot.
I like it. Good stuff. Jessica MacDonald, thank you so much for playing the Fast Five today.
Thanks, Adam. It was fun.
And there you have it, folks. That wraps up this week's edition of Telile 24/7. Thank you for tuning in, and a special thank you to my interview guests this week, Patrick Lamey, Jessica MacDonald, and Amanda Mombourquette. If you have any thoughts about what you've seen over the past hour, or you'd just like to make some suggestions for a future edition of Telile 24/7, I'd love to hear them. You can contact me directly. My phone number is 902-625-8863, or you can reach me by email. The address is adamjrcook, cook with an E, @gmail.com. You can also contact Telile Community Television directly with your suggestions and your commentary. The station phone number in Arichat is 902-226-1928, and the best email address to use is telile@telile.tv. Don't forget to follow Telile on social media. We're on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube, and our YouTube channel features every single episode of Telile 24/7, including this one, as well as all the episodes of our sister program Roundtable and exclusive coverage of Richmond Municipal Council's regular and Committee of the Whole meetings. For now, I'm Adam Cook. Thank you once again for joining me for Telile 24/7. I look forward to seeing you again next week with a brand new show. Bye for now.